Welcome to the DevReady Podcast. On today's episode of the DevReady Podcast, I have Kayla Medica. Thanks for joining me, Kayla.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, not a problem. Happy to have you on. What I'll do is I'll let you take care of your introduction and provide some background, because I'm sure I will do a terrible job even if I try to remember.
That's okay. It's a twisty, long road. So I started out actually as a translator. I was translating Japanese into English for marketing materials, and then went more into the marketing side. Left that industry because there's not that many jobs, and also working for a Japanese company has a bad reputation for a good reason. And then kind of fell into startups and tech, and eventually worked my way into marketing for tech startups. Left that about a year and a half ago, and have been on my own as a fractional CMO for tech startups ever since. And
Okay,
I
so
run a newsletter.
yeah, I've seen that as well. So there's a common thread there, which is sort of like the marketing space all the way through. What was the bad experience with the Japanese country? Just have to mention because you
Oh my God.
you
So
threw it out there.
they like
Is it just the
well,
work
in
ethic?
Japan, there's like death by overwork. Like it's a
Yep.
genuine problem.
Okay.
Um, Japanese people setting up companies in countries outside of Japan tend to export that working culture with them. And so I was working for a pretty difficult company that would send me 60 pages to translate at 10 p.m. and say, I need this by 9 a.m. And then,
Oh well.
it just was like, you have to be available round the clock. If you say like, I'm going out, I'm not going to be available, they'll say, yes, that's fine to your face. And then 2 hours later, you get a text message that's like, we need you.
Oh
So
well. It's a
it
quite a
was,
bad culture then.
yeah.
Yeah. The main story I've heard from the Japanese ones is the way they make you leave by not giving you any work and just pretending you're a
Oh
ghost.
yeah, that's real. It didn't happen to me, but it's such a real thing. You get demoted, and then they will just literally not give you anything to do. But in Japan, the way that their hiring works is that there's like intakes.
Hmm.
And so if you like kind of just quit your job and you're not at an intake season, you could be jobless for like a year because no one's they all
Oh
hire at the
wow.
same
Okay.
time. Yeah, it's kind of changing now, especially with like foreign companies and startups and stuff like that, but it's still very much like prestigious to be working at like a Japanese company that's been around for like a Honda or a
Yeah.
Toyota or whatever. Like that's prestigious, and they do the Japanese hiring season.
Okay.
So yeah, like there's no like constant flow of jobs.
Interesting. I didn't know that's how it works. So,
Yeah.
what sort of pushed you into the marketing space then?
So the company that I was translating for was a Japanese agency. So I just basically took any job that was translating Japanese into English.
Okay.
But if you've ever seen Japanese marketing, it's very different to literally any other country's style of marketing. And so a lot of my job, because I was the only Australian, and they specifically wanted to be marketing to Australian, like white Australians. Um, I just had to keep pushing back, being like, there's too much, like people don't care about this. What they would rather hear is these things. And so it became more of like a cultural consulting, as well as
Okay.
translating. And it was just things like they would want to use the Japanese word for an ingredient. It specifically was restaurants. So
Yep.
like they would want to stick to, this is the Japanese word for this ingredient. I was like, that's, no one knows what that is. Like if you want white Australians who don't speak Japanese to buy this, you need to explain it to them in their own language what it is. Um, and yeah, and like give them the information that they want. So it was very much like put yourself in the place of the customer, and
Yep.
do all that common advice that's given. And then yeah, I eventually left after a couple of years, and then I just kind of floated for a bit. I didn't have a job lined up, and so a couple of startups reached out to me and were interested in some marketing work, and transitioned that way.
Yep. So how did you find that sort of transition from tech startup, that move into tech startup from restaurants and ingredients and menus?
I have to say, like working with restaurants and chefs are very similar to founders. Like they're often the business owner. They
Mhm.
care the most. They have the most opinions. They have a very specific way of things that they want to do things. And so going to founders was not that different, except that I wasn't translating anymore.
Yep.
So yeah, I would say the only thing is that I was quite young and inexperienced in terms of business, and so the reason startups were coming to me was because my rates were so low, and startups don't have budget, so they were like, "Oh, we can afford you."
Yep. Okay. It's just like a quick way to get into the
Yeah.
door. At least it sort of led to your benefit. You could get in, get that
Yeah.
experience with the startups. It wasn't things are on the line, but it's not as crucial as when you're maintaining a huge budget for a big company. Because the
Yeah.
startups don't really know what they're doing either. They're just trying to sense out the market and understand who do we actually trying to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you probably had a similar issue with the Japanese business versus the startups where they're talking to points to trying to get their customers involved or interested in their product, but then they're using the wrong words or they're being too technical depending on the founder, or they don't know who their customers are and they're talking to them the wrong way.
Yeah. It's a lot of like when you're the expert, you forget what it's like to not be an expert. And so how like you have to dumb yourself down and go back to, okay, before I knew about this topic, like what were the questions that I had and what did I want to know?
Yeah, it's how do you explain it to a kid is generally an easy way to try and phrase it because yeah, if you don't have that frame of reference, you're just going to be talking over people's heads, or they're not going to understand the context of what you're discussing.
Yeah.
The Japanese ingredient scenario all over again.
Yeah.
So, what sort of lessons did you learn, or did you take away at that point on working with those startups?
I mean, valuing myself was a big one. I was doing like lots of small projects for small amounts, and so the like churn of work was really hard. I mainly was doing it because I just didn't have a plan, and like if I gave myself advice back then, I'd be like, don't do this, go get a job, um, which I eventually did do, and I got a full-time job at a startup. Mainly because I just knew that I didn't know that much, and startups are really interesting, and so learning from a safer environment that's like more consistent and stable. I mean, as in comparison to being self-employed, a startup was looking pretty stable, and I also knew that I didn't want to do like a corporate job, like that just wasn't appealing to me at all. So it kind of was like, this is this exciting thing. At the time, it was fairly new to Australia. Like, obviously, Canberra and Atlassian already existed, but
Hmm.
in terms of it becoming like well known amongst the public, it wasn't quite there yet. So it did feel like I was discovering a secret.
Yeah, okay. So, from just saying that you mentioned that if you gave yourself advice, you said you wouldn't have gone out on your own. Do you think that would have sort of changed where you are now then, because you haven't gone through those lessons?
I don't think I was teaching myself that much. Like that's what I if it, when you're
Okay.
self-employed, you're in charge of your own learning and development, and I don't
Yeah.
think I was doing much to learn. And I also didn't have a mentor to learn from. Like I kept telling myself I'm going to go back to translating. Marketing's temporary. It's just to pay the bills. I'm going to find a
Oh,
new
okay. So it
translating
wasn't
job.
the start of a new journey that you were planning.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
it took me like 5 years before I was like, I don't think I'm going back to translating. Like I think this is here to stay. So yeah, it just wasn't consciously making decisions. I kind of was just seeing what happened.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we started very young the business. So I started was it 22? I think it's been 16 years. So yeah, 22 when we started the business in a funny year. But I have no one's taught me how to program outside of uni. So
Yeah,
that whole side has been self-learning development. Like if I haven't learned something every day, I haven't been keeping up with everything. So it's always a challenge in the tech space. But the business side takes quite a long time to get your head around things.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not
yeah,
just money in, money out. There's a shitload
yeah.
more to it. Like that you have to manage and understand, especially when you're dealing with clients as well. So yeah, having a mentor or not having that proper plan and thinking you're going to go back probably made it a little bit more difficult for you at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to uni for marketing either, so I kind of was using my language skills in copywriting contexts. So like making sure that things were clear and like well
Hmm.
conveyed and stuff like that was sort of what I was mostly doing copywriting. Um, but yeah, I had no business acumen and I didn't have a marketing background. So in terms of me teaching myself, it really was just the blind leading the blind. And I was given such small pieces of work that were so siloed. Like I wasn't given full context around how this is going to impact the business or anything like
Ah,
that,
okay, yep.
that I don't think I was learning that much. I was just practicing copywriting really. And then when I joined a company for the first time and saw all the pieces fitting together and fully looking at it from a marketing context and having a few other marketers to talk to, I think that's when I really started to take off.
Yeah, and then having that support, I'm sure would have helped, like the ground where your knowledge base was, and then starting to see how the jigsaw pieces come together to make a campaign and promote and then planning with stakeholders, understanding who your personas are, and moving forward from there.
Yeah, even just from like a freelancing perspective, I was never given CRM access or anything like that. So the tools as well, like I was only learning them when I joined a company and I was
Okay,
given
so it
like
was really
logins.
just here's something,
Yeah,
fix it up.
yeah, it was.
Okay, so that's an interesting journey that you've taken. Then you're working at that startup. You're in the marketing position. I'm not sure where it was, but then where did you go from there?
Yeah, so I was working at a company called, I had a few sort of like jobs. So I joined a startup that I was only at for a couple of months because I just didn't really know what I was doing. And then I joined a company called Startup Muster, which does the survey of startups. I joined in 2018, which was the last year they did it. And then I think they brought it back this year.
Okay.
Um, I was there for a year. So that's where I really got my, like, I got to know a lot of VCs. I got to know a lot of like the investment side of things, working with them as stakeholders. Like we weren't raising, but I was constantly talking to them to be like, what information do you need to know? What data do you need to know? All that kind of stuff. And then promoting to founders. So I was kind of building like a marketplace where I was in the middle, founders were on one side and VCs were on the other. And I developed a pretty good network from that. And then, yeah, it shut down after the 2018 report came out. They ran out of funding. And then I joined a company called Perkbox, which I credit a lot of my learnings to them. I was there for a couple of years as well. They started in the UK, so they were a
Hmm.
British startup, and they were like, "We want to go international. What is like the most difficult time zone to work with? Australia." So they expanded here. I was the first Australian hire. I was the only marketer in Australia. They had a marketing team in the UK, but obviously with the time zone, we like didn't really,
Barely see them. Yeah.
yeah, barely spoke to them. And then yeah, like growing Perkbox from absolutely zero here. Like there was a brand and there was a product, but there was absolutely no brand recognition. Employee engagement was not super well known at the time. Obviously, we have Culture Amp and Employment Hero doing it here as well, so we were kind of competing against them in a slightly different space. And so yeah, that taught me a lot about working with sales teams, like all the tools. Like they had big budgets when I was there, and so that kind of took me to the next step up. And then from there, I joined a company called Willow, which I was looking for a more specific role. So I had a look at all the things that I was doing at Perkbox because I was, the only person, so I was doing like a little bit of everything.
Hmm.
And I really analyzed like which parts do I enjoy doing and which parts do I not enjoy doing, and then went and looked at a bunch of job descriptions and basically was like, which ones match my list of things I do like doing. And I came up with product marketing and customer engagement marketing. And then I was applying for both. I got a job as product marketing at Willow. It was a data platform for digital twins of different industries. So it
Hmm.
was a very technical product. It was very difficult, really complex concepts that had to be broken down into simple terms because we were speaking to customers and they were like, after speaking to you, I'm more confused. So that that was a really big hurdle to
The goal of
overcome.
any marketer.
Yeah, I was like, we're doing great, we're doing really good work. And then yeah, I worked my way up to head of product marketing, built a team. We were starting to make a lot of progress, and then Willow had layoffs. It's one of the many companies that got hit by the layoffs in like 2022.
Hmm.
So I took that as my sign to leave. Um, and then I actually just put this post on LinkedIn that was like, hey, I don't have a job. It's the first week of December. No one's hiring, but I'm up for coffee catch ups if anyone wants to chat. Like I have all the time in the world right now. And a few people reached out and said, well, I've got some project work that I need doing. If you want to do it just over Christmas, you know, go for it. And this was like going back to my startup master days of like the investors that I spoke to, the founders that I spoke to, like they were all coming back into play. And so I started doing some project work with the full intention of getting a job. Ended up deciding that I really liked doing that and then transitioned into full-time freelancer contracting, fractional marketing, CMO, whatever. I
Yep.
don't really care what people call it. And that's where I am now.
Okay. See, now you've got the foundations in place now to really
Yeah.
be able to support and help those businesses, organizations that you're working with.
Yeah. So I've got, the investing, the fundraising, the growth, the 0 to 1, low budgets, high budgets, big team,
Yeah.
small team. Now I can actually put it all together and be like, okay, you are here. you are similar to all these other situations that I've seen. This is how we can start, and then we'll experiment from there.
Yeah. So out of the sort of the two bits that you're looking at, so like the marketing or the product marketing, because they're slightly different when you're doing a product versus a brand and trying to do brand
Yeah.
recognition or, and so what do you prefer?
I prefer product marketing. So I always tell my clients, like, I won't do your social media and I won't do events because they're just like not what I enjoy doing. They were on the strong, I don't enjoy doing these
Yep.
list. So that's like the good thing now about being my own boss is being able to say, like, I'm not going to do that, or I don't
Yep.
want to do that, and not having to.
It's always a good spot when you can get to that position where you
Yeah.
can sort of say, all right, I'm choosing this kind of work, or I this is what I focus on. So you've got to figure out how to gate people away from that. But you sort of, from what I've seen on your newsletter and what you're doing on YouTube, you are doing some social media stuff yourself.
I try to like there's some clients that I really love and I will make exceptions for them. But generally like if I engage a new client, like the first thing I'll say is like no events, no social media. And if it is social media, I will try and because obviously I run social media for myself and I don't
Yep.
enjoy doing it, which is why I don't want to do it for someone else.
Yep.
Um, but I have learnings from that and I have knowledge. And so I'll share that and I will try to inform someone else on their team and teach them and train them and then they do it. And
Yep.
that's how I can get around like, okay, I like you, I'll stretch my rules for you. But I don't want to be the one writing captions. And also you're
Yep.
paying me way too much to
To do
be
that.
doing that kind of work. It's actually a waste of your money.
Yeah, yeah. The posting to social media is it's a trivial thing, sort of once the content's been created, and it is just like the menial part of the job.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
we've written a long form blog, cut it up into 10 captions. Like that shouldn't,
yeah.
you should
It's
be paying my rates for that.
yeah. You've got better value you can provide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some of the key things you've learned along the way with trying to market products? Then, so if we'll probably focus on that, if that's what you prefer to
Yeah.
talk about as well.
I would say don't try and be impressive. Like really dumb it down. Really say it as simply as you can. Like get rid of all the bells and whistles and like just say what it does and say what it's going to give people. I think like even now I occasionally will look at websites and I'll come away being like, I have no idea what this company does. And like, I'm a product marketer. I should be able to like read through the
In
layers,
between the
but I
lines.
can't. So
Yep.
I think that's still like the basic advice that gets repeated all the time for a reason. And it's because people still don't do it. So yeah, I mean, like just simple is the best way to go.
So when I know a lot of people when they're starting to build their products, they start listing out specs or features and trying to say these are the 101 things our software can do, but that people don't shop on specs
No, and
necessarily.
also they will have like one thing they want to see, and as soon as they see that one thing, they'll be like, okay, we can talk. But if they have to sift through a list of 100 things before they see it, they're gonna they're not gonna read a list of 100 things. Like there's so many founders and marketing people as well who will be like, what we have to say is so important. People will read every word, or they will watch this 10-minute video and they will listen to every second of it. And it's like attention spans are so valuable. Like even me, if like if I meet someone
Mhm.
and I know that they subscribe to my newsletter, I still approach it with, I assume you have not read a single issue, and I'm not going to speak to you as if you have all this assumed knowledge.
Yeah,
Because it's one, it's kind of egotistical to make that assumption that people follow your every word, and two, it's just not true.
yeah. You're competing with everyone else for everyone's
Yeah,
attention, and just because they know who you are or they've it's like you said subscribe to a newsletter doesn't mean they're looking at anything that's actually coming
yeah,
out of it. We've got
yeah,
I don't know 500 subscribers, not a lot, but I'm assuming three of the actual read it. You might get
yeah.
a few percent opening it.
Like one of them is my best friend, one of them is my boss who proofread it,
Yeah, and then
it's
one's me when I check, oh,
yeah.
the team actually sent it, so I'll just have a look at it. Like,
Yeah, and then if
yeah,
there's a fourth, it's a tracking error.
you normally, it's a lot of that stuff is just to try and stay top of mind, the way
Yeah,
I see it. So it's just continually having content out there so that people can remember that you exist, not necessarily follow your content.
I get most of my work through people being like, I saw you on LinkedIn, or someone recommended you, and then I'll ask who recommended me, and it'll be like someone that I'm connected with on LinkedIn, but I don't actually talk to them. So
Okay.
just there is this metric called share of voice. I think it's underrated, and it's basically like who is the loudest. And the theory is that the loudest wins. So
Hmm.
if you have like you take the last month of social media posts from you and your competitors, whoever posted the most will probably be getting better impressions and better reach. But there's like, some ups and downs to that metric as well. But it's also like whoever has the biggest budget usually wins.
Of course, it's more ads, more impressions, more eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't normally get people coming completely cold. So it's not like a third-party recommendation from someone we don't know. It's a lot of networking based, so clients we've dealt with then recommend. But we do get a lot of feedback saying, "Oh, I did see your something on LinkedIn, or I saw your article recently." So just having that feedback proves that, all right, what we're doing is worth doing, because people are noticing it, even though you don't normally get any of that feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. The most frustrating answer I get when I ask people like, how did you hear about me, is they'll be like, oh, someone recommended you. And I'm like, who? They're like, I don't remember. I'm like, oh, this is not good.
It shouldn't be that hard to follow back.
Yeah.
Yeah, or some people may take weeks to get back to a message or respond to things, so I can understand how they forget. But it's, having that network, and then, like you said, cut through. So are you the loudest voice, even just on a given day or a certain time, can be important, because you don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah, timing is always hard. Like as a self-employed person, there's this weird balance of promoting myself and that I'm around, that I exist so that people know of me, but then also being like, right now I can't take any more work, I'm full, but I might have an opening in 6 months. And so like I want to promote that I'm here, but I don't actually want any new work. But then if I don't promote that I'm here in 6 months, people may have forgotten about me and I'll have to start from scratch rather than starting from a nice baseline.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
It's a fun juggling act, and that's a similar thing for like a startup. Yeah. Like they've got funds now to do something. Are they going to be around long enough to try and keep it going? Or what do they invest in? Is it, how much do they keep tweaking the product to get it right versus how much do they market to get it people using it before it's not where they think it should be?
One of my clients now has this problem where, so it's still founder-led sales, still a pretty lean team. And there's this, like, we have all this momentum and we could push it towards getting more leads, but we actually don't have the sales capacity to speak to more people. Like the pipeline is packed. We've only got one person doing sales. They're also doing onboarding. They're also doing tech support. Like we actually can't, they don't have any more hours in a day to take leads. So it's like, okay, we kind of have to like pull back, but we don't want to pull back too much, because then once this, cohort of leads is through, like we want to be filling the pipeline up behind them. But yeah, there's all sorts of balances at play.
So in that position where they're doing everything, you're in a similar spot. Have you thought of, I'm not sure what your plans are for your business, but like trying to get the support in to assist you on some of the stuff that you don't like doing to give you more time to do that stuff?
This is like the biggest problem that I have in terms of like running a business, which is that I have the doing part, which is where my client work and working and, managing relationships and stuff like that. And then there's actually like doing my taxes and my finances and invoicing people and tracking what I'm doing and all that kind of stuff. And I also, like, people have asked me, are you going to hire someone so that you can do more work and, make an agency and stuff like that? And I think no, because if I started an agency, then I'd be an agency owner and that would be my job. My job wouldn't be doing the product marketing that I enjoy doing. And so I want to be doing that work. I don't want to outsource that, because like that's the stuff that I want to be doing. And the stuff that I don't want to be doing kind of like crosses into this gray area of client security policies and stuff like that. So like I would love to have someone pull all my client emails into a single email for me, and I don't have to check like 5 email accounts every day. But my clients have security policies, which is why they've given me that email in the first place. Or, I would love someone to consolidate my 5 calendars into one, so I could stop like having to consult 5 calendars before I book something in. But again, there's like gray area of security policies, and one of my clients, their security policies that they have to provide me the hardware, so I work from their laptop, which is a huge pain in the ass. But I totally get it. Like their industry requires it. But that's the stuff I'm like, I'd love to outsource that. That's the most painful part, is like just organizing, but I can't because of security policies.
That's interesting. I haven't heard of that happening to a freelancer before, where the actual hardware is given for you to do work with them as well.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't know that they were going to give it to me. Like I showed up, they were like, "Can you come in the office for your first day for like onboarding?" I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." I brought all my stuff with me, thinking that I was going to work off my laptop, and then they were like, "Here you go," and I was like, "Oh, I." If you had told me this was the case, I probably would have added a bit to my fee for the inconvenience of this.
Yeah, just the extra little hassle now of having that
Yeah,
and having to deal with it. So, with that sort of like having the support rather than trying to transition out of what you enjoy doing,
yeah,
the best thing I ever read online was normally businesses, when they hire people, it's to replace what they're currently doing so then they can
yeah,
do it at the same time. It's better to do the things that you don't like doing.
yeah,
So the accounts, the invoicing, or whatever that section is, that's where you need to hire. So then you can focus on the things where you can actually put 100% effort in,
yeah.
because you'll never do the things you don't like as good as the things you do.
Yeah, I mean, like, because I only ever have like a handful of clients at a time, and they're usually long term. Like this year, I all of my retainer clients I've had since either January or since last year, and none of them have churned. So like,
Oh, that's
I'm
good.
sending the same like four people the same invoice every month. Like that amount of work
Yeah,
is it takes me like 20 minutes. It's really not that hard to do. So I don't see value in outsourcing that.
yeah,
Um, and they all pay. Like I'm lucky
yeah.
that
You're
like
not
I've
in that
never,
high churn
yeah,
that you were originally, where then that would have taken up a lot of your time to then
yeah.
invoice and manage all of those jobs.
I'm not chasing like, hey, you haven't paid your invoice. So that's all quite fine. And then my finances are reasonably simple. Like I have some subscription services that I have like a Miro account and
Yeah,
whatever. And so that's recurring. And the accounting software that I use has like a recurring subscription option. So if I sign up, I put it in once and then I don't have to do it every month, which is great. But yeah, it's really the email and the
yeah.
calendar.
Yeah, it can get a bit tedious, especially if you've got 5 or 6 different systems and accounts you have to be and use, and then remember what's what and where. And then say if 3 of them are using Outlook, then you have to keep
Oh
swapping
my
different
God.
accounts.
That's the worst. That's actually the worst is Outlook. I used it when I worked at Willow because we were a Microsoft company. And then since leaving, I've like totally forgotten how to use it. And when they gave it to me, I literally was like, how do I start a new email? Like I'm so unfamiliar with this.
It just a little. If you need a bit of advice, if you have to have multiple Microsoft accounts running, try use different workspaces or profiles
Yeah.
in your browser. At least that way, you probably know that anyway. But little tip there.
Yeah. I'd rather not have that problem at all.
So where you're going with the business and trying to market, and then the product management? Do you see that there's a space for you to potentially come have some product with what you're doing and try to move into that space rather than trying to
Yeah.
scale to an agency?
There's a couple like when you work in a services business, every piece of advice you ever hear is find a way to productize your offering. And for services, that often means having bundles or having packages that you sell at a set rate and you don't have to customize them every time and you're not creating customized off services to every customer you meet.
Mm.
That I pretty much had from the beginning because I like had my list of things that I like doing and product marketing's kind of like a hot topic. So people were like, yep, I need that. Come in and do it. Um, where I have experimented a little is where I've seen teams struggle, like especially because I work with smaller teams, they might have one marketer, or I know other people who are from my newsletter, they're a solo marketer, and I think that there's a solution there for marketers to get together. And I've explored this with my friends who do other jobs as well. So one of my friends works in sales ops. She's the only person in her company that works with sales ops.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this, where do I go? Who do I learn from? Who can I just bounce ideas around with? Like sometimes when you're alone, you feel like you're going crazy, and with marketing, it'll be the most simple things like, should this button be blue or should this button be red? And you're like, I just need someone to be like, try blue.
Yeah.
Or like, it's low stakes kind of stuff. Or
Mm-hmm.
I have been working on this piece of content for so long, I no longer can read it with fresh eyes. I just
Yep.
need someone else to do it. But other people, like I've worked with salespeople who will be like, yep, looks good. And I'm like, did you even read it? Like, they're not
Not really.
copywriters, they're not content people. And so
Yep.
I explored this, I called it the Mehdeeka focus sessions. So it was mainly for my newsletter subscribers, where it was like we'd all get onto a Miro board at the same time. It was limited to like 4 or 5 people at a time. And you'd have to pre-submit your work to me. I would set up the Miro board, and then it would be like 10 minutes on each person's thing where we would all go to one area on the Miro board and you'd be leaving comments. And then we'd go to the next one. And so by the end, you've given 3 or 4 pieces of feedback and you've received 3 or 4 pieces of feedback on yours from different opinions. And this is like where it's really frustrating as like a single person, because the response was really good and people said they got a lot out of it and they didn't mind taking half an hour out of their day to give feedback in return for all that feedback as well. And it helped them, even if they were reviewing something that they're not currently working on, they would read other people's feedback on someone else's work and be like, oh, I'm going to squirrel that away for later. But it was the feedback was very like, when I need it now.
Yep.
And
not at
so
a focus group or that certain time.
Yeah, like having a set, Friday at 9 a.m. might be too late. I might not have it. Like, something launched on a Thursday, Friday is too late.
Yep.
And so the feedback was very like, you need rolling sessions, like constantly going. And for that to work, I would also need like a critical mass of users.
Yep.
And I was like, I do think that there's something there and I think it's valuable. And I've seen other people try to solve the problem in other ways. So I know that it's a universal problem for small teams, but I'm, running my own business, doing my own work, running my newsletter and building this side gig. I was like, I don't know if I have the passion for it, to be honest. Like,
it's a lot of things to juggle, but I can understand the value in that, because when we all work remotely from home at the moment. So we used to have an office. At one point, there was 14 of us in the office, and we cut it back, and now we're all completely remote. And there's about 6 left in Australia, and the bulk of the team is overseas. But so I work on wireframes, and I may be stuck on a certain layout of something. Like I remember one client recently, I was stuck on the layout for about 3 hours trying to figure out what's the best way to really represent this very complicated structure. And then I asked a couple of people, they didn't really know. And they're like, yeah, that looks okay. And I just left it because I couldn't figure out what to do.
That in your mind,
2 weeks
it's
later,
not okay.
Yeah. And I came back 2 weeks later and I still haven't changed it. I just didn't know what to do with it. So I've just left it as is. And then, all right, the client will get some feedback and we'll figure out how to make it better. But yeah, having that feedback from other people that are doing something similar to what you're doing, not just people in your team, I can see how that will be very valuable.
Yeah, I think there's also room for people who have like not a great relationship with their manager, or their manager's not good at giving feedback, where they just want like constructive feedback. They don't want their manager to, whatever their situation is. I've definitely had good managers and bad managers when it comes to feedback. And sometimes it's like, I don't want to ask this person for their opinion.
Yeah. An idea that's just come to mind as you're talking about that problem would be, this is your product potentially. Have it run sort of like a surveys platform where you can have an issue. You've got your problem, you can post it, and then people will get notified that are in the community, come back and respond. But you can only post one every time you leave X amount of responses to other people. So you're building up a community and a thing like that way. That way you can get it when you need it.
Yeah, I think there's probably multiple ways to go about it. I kind of got to the point where I was like, there's probably a tech solution that needs to be built for this, and I'm not technical.
Yep.
Where DevReady comes in.
Yeah, that's what we do. We help you plan those ideas like that. So there's the equivalent, like forums and things will be like that, but this will be more focused. Like you have it a bit more focused on helping each other and then having that reputation and just trying to get people similar, not just because if you put things on forums, you get a lot of people, especially in the tech space. It's not worded well enough, or please fix your title. Like they nitpick on little things before they try and help you.
Yeah, there was I told this story recently, so it's fresh in my mind, but there was one time we were planning like a demo video. We were going to do like high production video quality and get like professional voiceover artists. But to make sure that we were happy with the script, I did a voiceover, like, not that serious, just to be like, okay, it's more similar to what the final product is going to be. Are we happy with it? Do we want to change any words? Because once we get it professionally recorded, we can't change it. And I showed it to the sales team and I was like, you can give feedback on anything other than the fact that I'm the one saying it and my voice and my pronunciation. And like the first piece of feedback was, you kind of stuttered on a word there. I think we should re-record it. And I was like, oh, you didn't listen.
It's just not focusing on the right thing then.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get that problem with wireframes again. If you start putting the client's brand and logo over the wireframes, that's all they then now focus on is the positioning and color and is it on style, rather than the structure of the page or the functionality we're trying to convey. So it's really hard once you start adding sort of like that personalized touch. in your scenario, it's a little bit different because you're not. It's like ignore me. Is
Yeah,
the word are the words I'm saying okay, not how I'm saying them.
yeah, yeah. I also work with a lot of like with marketing stuff that gets designed. There's often a really big disconnect between how marketers work and how designers work versus what founders expect to see. So, you know, copy always comes first, design always comes second because the designer has to have the words to design around them.
Yep.
But a lot of founders will like sign off on the copy and be like, yeah, I love it. And then they see it in design and they're like, oh, I don't like it anymore. And it's because they're like, oh, I didn't really imagine what it would look like. And it's like, oh, okay, like you signed off on it, so we can't really go, like, we can go back, but
You have to
that's
do it
really not
again.
how this is meant to work.
Yep.
You should have thought about this before. And so, yeah, it's like almost like you need to do a mock up of the mock up and put the copy in it for them to like picture it in their mind for them to sign off on it. But then they'll see the final design and be like, oh, but this is different to the mock up. And it's like, oh, because it was a mock up. Like,
It's never ending.
yeah.
Yeah, it's is that trouble that you find with a lot of startups because they're jumping into something they've never done before or coming from a
Yeah.
different area that they don't know what marketing really is?
Yeah, they don't know what marketing is. They don't know the processes and they don't like they're used to having a finished thing served to them on a plate and being like, it's done.
Yep.
Because that's how they've been serviced as an engineer in a company. Or like, they don't get input on drafts. They don't see early drafts. Like they don't see the crap that you start with and then the
Hmm.
finished thing at the end, which is shiny and polished. So they, I don't know if they like think that it always just comes out perfect the first go. Like they don't realize that there's rounds of reviews and things like that. I'm not sure because I'm like, surely in your code or whatever it is that your specialty, your
Yep.
sales process, you have a process where you start kind of crap and then you get better iteratively.
It should be common. That's what you'd expect.
Yeah. And then they see marketing first drafts and they'll be like, what the hell is this? And I'm like, it's conceptual. Like, we've got to go through and say like this part I like, this part I don't, and then we steer towards
Yeah.
the I like part. And yeah, some of them just look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, this is how it works.
The education is always fun trying to explain to people who've never seen it before or been involved in anything related, really, how the process works. And that's where it's how do you explain something simply for people who don't understand, where they're not experts, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's kind of like you're a founder, you signed up for this, like get comfortable with it.
yeah, you're jumping into the deep end
Yeah.
and you just have to figure out what to do yourself. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
They can either go and watch a lot of YouTube videos and learn themselves, or they bring people like you on to try and help them. So, before we wrap up, any sort of key tips if someone's looking out there that's listening and is trying to get their product out to the market? What are some really short key tips you can provide?
Yeah, so tips for founders, go speak to people. The biggest, whenever I get questions from founders, they, pay for an advice session with me or something like that. And the biggest advice I end up giving is you shouldn't be telling this to me. You should be testing this in the market. So I can't give you good advice on what kind of marketing you should do if you don't have market feedback. Go talk to people. Don't be scared of showing your crappy first drafts. Get feedback, get a lot of it. Like set yourself a goal and be like, I'm going to keep approaching people until I get 10, until I get 50, like whatever it is, just keep going until you get 50 conversations or whatever your number is. And then you can analyze that data to decide what you're going to do. Or you can take it to a marketer and say, what would you do with this information? How would this inform a marketing plan? If you've already done that, I would say the next piece of advice is marketing is either spending money or spending time. You can go fast or you can go slow. You can do both, but you can't do neither. So you have to do one of them at least. And then if you are a marketer and you're working with the founder, my advice is like, yeah, as you said, education is a big thing. Like show them how the process works. Walk them through what you're going to do before you do it, including we're going to have a draft. It's going to be shit. Then we're going to do a second draft. It's going to be better. Then hopefully by the third or fourth iteration, it's complete. It's going to be copy first, then design. I need you to imagine it in this way. If I need feedback from you, I need specific feedback on these things, and I don't need feedback on anything else. It's because, yeah, some people don't know how to give feedback, and so you have
Yeah.
to tell them exactly what feedback you're looking for. Otherwise,
That,
you'll just be off topic.
Yeah, and they still may not listen to that either.
And they still won't listen to that either. Yeah, and then I guess if anyone is considering going fractional product marketing specifically, there is more work than there are fractional product marketers. I need people to refer work to. There's a very small group of us. I would happily invite you in, so you can reach out to me for that. And yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks for those. I'm sure that will help someone listening out there. Yeah, and a couple of things on that is if you're not embarrassed by your first version of something, you haven't
Oh
gone
yeah.
fast enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you definitely need to speak to people to get feedback.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't know if you're going in the right direction, the right area, or anything. So it's key that if you're listening out there, is go and talk to people and don't be scared to show your product. No one's going to go and copy it
Oh
because there's a lot
yeah.
of work
No
that
one's
gets
gonna
to that
copy it.
point. Yeah.
If you've spent countless nights working till midnight and you think someone else is gonna be like, yeah, I'll do that, you're wrong.
Yeah,
They're not
it's
gonna
not
do
going to
that.
happen. And it doesn't happen overnight either. It's not like, yeah, you spent weeks or months building something. No one's going to see it and go, you know what, I'm going to steal your entire business idea and just give up whatever I'm doing now to pursue your idea.
Yeah.
They've got their own thing they're trying to build on the side. So if anyone wants to reach out and find out more, how can they do that, Kayla?
Yeah, so come find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only person in the world with my name, so I should be very easy to find. Otherwise, my newsletter is mehdeeka.substack.com. I'm sure that'll be in the show notes,
Yeah,
probably.
we'll add all of that in.
Yeah.
All right, well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Kayla. Thank you so much, and I wish you luck into the future.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thanks.